Welcome to the Across the Spoilerverse podcast. I'm your host, Paul. Once more, joined by the biggest heavy spoilers fan I've ever seen because you're rocking that t-shirt. It's Greg
Yeah,
Alba. How's it going? I feel bad.
we were on a call for 10 minutes beforehand. I'm like, this mother F word has not brought up at all that I've been wearing heavy spoiler shirt this entire time. And all I wanted was a bit of recognition. And now I got it. So I feel great, my friend. How are you? How are you?
I'm good, yeah. It's good. It's good chatting with you. It's the highlight of my week every week. We're dropping this a day early, hopefully. I've got a big video coming out tomorrow, fingers crossed. It's been a crazy weekend trying to get the video ready. We're dropping an hour-long Empire Strikes Back breakdown. You know, people are hitting me up all the time like, oh, we should go back to just doing 8-minute fun videos. And I'm like, oh, I've got some bad news about the big Star Wars video we're doing. But looking at just things in general at the moment, the movie industry, it's all over the place. Things are getting hit with delays. The strikes are still ongoing. We're going to be breaking it all down in this video and talking about this week's biggest stories. Greg, have you got a rundown? I need a rundown.
Of everything we're going to talk. We got delays, we got box office, and we have the Avengers writers. They might be getting, it looks like they've been fired, like Jeff Loveness and whatnot, and whoever the other guy is. I don't know. They're looking for new writers. And then, of course, we got WGA updates, which Paul will give us the breakdown for. Paul will do all the breakdown, and I'll be here nodding my head, going, interesting stuff. What do you want to start with, man? You want to start with, you want to do the box? You're the box office expert. That's what the internet knows you as. Do you want to go through the box office first?
I hope not. Yeah, we'll go through the box office. Super Mario Brothers movie is now no longer the highest grossing movie of the year because Barbie has overtaken it. It's been absolutely crazy. You know, they've just also announced that it's going to be coming to IMAX for 1 week only, starting September 22nd, with a never-before-seen post-credit scene that's going to be shown. I still haven't seen Barbie, unfortunately.
Neither have I.
And I hadn't seen Mario for quite a while, and then I was like, "Oh, it's the biggest, it's the highest grossing movie of the year." I bet I'm gonna lose my movie critic credentials here if I don't see it. But yeah, still haven't seen it, unfortunately. Might go check the IMAX screening. But yeah, it's absolutely killing it.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy how we have this movie podcast and all we do is talk about the crap in this industry. We still haven't seen Barbie. I think that is drastically affected. What came out this weekend? Was it Gran Turismo? Gran Turismo finally
Gran
debuted?
Turismo.
Did it do okay?
I think it did 17 million. Do you have the figures? Yeah,
yeah, it's 17.3 million with the domestic opening.
I was close.
Yeah, you were fantastic here. And of course, directed by Neil Blomkamp. But the movie has good reviews for the most part, I think. I feel like it'll probably have a decent audience score. They actually had some sneak previews that did okay, I suppose. Wow, Barbie is set to become the biggest movie for Warner Brothers right now, surpassing Harry Potter. Holy crap. Did you, I knew it would be a hit. I knew you didn't think it would be a hit, but man, this is a way bigger hit than I ever expected it to possibly be. Oppenheimer actually has a chance of maybe it's almost at 800 million global. If it stays like this, I don't know. That's a lot. That's $200 million more. But if it stays in the theater, could you think it could reach $1 billion? That would be nuts.
Well, the prediction for its total box office run is 950 million. That's what they think it's going to close out doing. And I've just actually bought a ticket just to be a shill and help it along a bit. But yeah, I mean, if it hit the billion, that would be absolutely insane. Obviously, this week they talked about how it's now Christopher Nolan's highest grossing original film.
Mm-hmm.
So, things like the Batman trilogy and stuff like that. Dark Knight and Dark Knight Rises, they did insane numbers. But, things, Inception, I think, was the next one on, but it's now surpassed that. So it's sitting really well. I think it's an incredible film. I think it deserves it. It's good to see these two movies just...
Logan Paul doesn't like it, man. Logan Paul has issues.
Yeah, I mean, he comes across like a guy who really loves film.
Yeah.
So I'm sure, you know, it's fine if he doesn't like it. I can totally watch that movie and see why a lot of people wouldn't. But just thinking about it, I mean, it's a biopic set in the 1940s that doesn't really have any action scenes and lots of things in black and white.
Yeah.
And for it to do that much money is absolutely insane. I think it shows the clout that Christopher Nolan has, and this is really going to skyrocket it. On one of the podcast episodes, can't remember which one it was, we did say that there's no one really like Nolan, and we got some comments saying like, "Well, James
James
Cameron and
Cameron.
Martin Scorsese."
Oh, I saw those
I think
comments.
what you,
Yeah.
I think what you meant to say was like people that aren't Martin Scorsese and James Cameron. They're not from like the 80s, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They've come in. This is sort of the next person who's like that, you know,
Definitely.
your next Spielberg. And yeah, Nolan seems to be absolutely killing it. I bet Warner Brothers, if they hadn't had this Barbie box office, they'd be absolutely just furious with themselves, because whoever came up with that idea for the day and date HBO Max thing that annoyed Christopher Nolan in the first place. I think it was Jason Kylar. Whew, I tell you, he's not there anymore, but he would be in big trouble. So The Flash has also been announced as being one of the biggest, well, the biggest comic book movie flop of all time, meaning that it's worse than Morbius, worse than the New Mutants. Absolutely crazy thinking
Yeah.
about how badly it's done. Blue Beetle following that is predicted to do 140 million to 170 million on a
Yeah.
box office of 105 million.
It's only at 46.3 million domestically at the moment.
Yeah, and it's
Oh.
had a 61% second weekend drop off, which is pretty bad.
I heard a interesting. I was talking with some people from. I won't say who, but I was talking with some people at Disney, and they were saying that they got a figure that was that because we have the actors who are not able to promote stuff. And, Oppenheimer and Barbie were still able to do their marketing runs like right up until the strike happened for the actors. But there's on average a 15% decrease in box office. That's what the estimate is, that because actors can't promote. I didn't realize it would be that. Might not sound like a huge amount, but it really is. And I didn't think it would even be that much. I was like, oh, apparently actors promoting stuff is still very, very vital to the box
Yeah,
office experience.
and I was thinking about that today actually, because I saw this calculation. I was thinking, I actually thought, Is that right though?" But I think what it is, what I deduced, Greg, in the end, is that we're quite plugged into what films are. For example, we know
Sure.
months in advance if we're going to go see a movie, and we normally do it off the trailers, or just generally what our audience is. For example, if it's a comic book movie, we're probably going to go see it just because our audience is based
Yeah.
around that. And then I was thinking, like my grandma, I do the grandma test on a lot of things, and my grandma often doesn't hear about films, and then she'll
Mhm.
ring me up and be like, "Oh, I saw this actor on Graham Norton talking about the new film." So I think she is sort of representative of the general audience and how they learn stuff from chat shows, and they're not as clued in as we are. They don't know release dates off by heart. You know what I mean? They just kind of hear about movies, might see the trailer in the cinema, and then they see the interviews and they're like, "Oh, is that out this week?" So yeah, 15% is quite a lot.
Yeah.
Quick maths: if your movie was gonna make 100 million, it's gonna make 85 million.
85
Yeah, I
million?
got that in the end.
That's great
Yeah.
math.
So yeah, I mean, you can see how it shakes out over time, and hopefully the studios will realize maybe the actors are important. Now, another thing that this actually relates to, that I was thinking this is really stupid, is
Mhm.
they've delayed Dune. So Dune was going to release this year, but they've now pushed it back to March next year.
Mhm.
And I did see a lot of comments being like, "Well, this is clearly because Timothy Chalamet and Florence Pugh, and all, because it's got quite a big cast, they're not going to be able to promote it, and the studio is really banking on them being able to do that, which is why they pushed it back because of the strikes." Now, do you think it's a good idea for them to delay June? Because I don't, and I'll talk about why it is in a bit.
I mean, they've already ramped up their marketing campaign for it. Like, I don't think they need, because at this point they could have already released. I've been checking already to see, like, are the Dune tickets on sale? Are the Dune tickets on sale? Didn't they just drop their Empire magazine big promo plug that was meant to
The day
be,
before.
yeah, it is a conduit for that, to be like, hey, look out for your Dune tickets. And the movie is a sequel as well. It's a part two. People have already. It's not the same as if this was if this was the first Dune movie. I would understand the argument for it much more. And then you were messaging me, telling me where they pushed the release date to in March 2024, and then you followed it up with a crap ton of other movies that are releasing in March 2024. And I think a movie like Dune, I don't think you want to release it in March. You want to release that like between the summer to winter time. Summer, winter, not fall, but like a time where people have a time to go to the theaters, where people are off work or off school, whatever. And I think this release date push is not the wisest, and I don't think it's really dependent on the actors promoting it. I feel like it would have been just fine because it is one of those things where they were already able to have their push. The marketing push was already happening, and it's a word of mouth, big theatrical IMAX going experience. And they also had all the IMAX theaters. I'm just realizing right now I think the Marvels is now able to go in there and take up the IMAX screens. But Dune is a specific IMAX movie going experience. They shot it with IMAX cameras, and now they're not going to be. I can't imagine they're going to be able to have that exclusivity for that many weeks. The way how a movie like Oppenheimer has been able to greatly benefit from it. And this is where you come in and say even smarter points than me, where I'm like, that's why
Maybe.
you're the man, Paul. That's why you're the man.
Maybe. So yeah, so being pushed to March, this is what the lineup of March 2024 looks like. Pixar's Elio, March 1st. The Fall Guy, March 1st. A Quiet Place, Day 1, with Part 1, I don't know if it's called that. A Quiet Place, Day 1,
Day one,
March
part one.
8th. But it has been said that's going to be pushed back, but that's March 8th. Kung Fu Panda 4, March 8th.
Oh,
Dune
yes.
2, March 15th. Snow White, March 22nd. Mickey 17, March 29th. Ghostbusters Afterlife sequel, whatever that's called, March 29th. And an Angel Studios film, The Shift, that's going to be that's to be confirmed in March as
That
well.
is way too busy. That is way too busy. We saw how Mission Impossible suffered from it. That's way too busy.
Well, even going back to March this year, I actually pulled up the lineup that we had, and that was a month where you might remember Ant-Man Quantumania dropped in February, and then March was like Creed 3, Evil Dead Rise, I think. I mean, there
Was
was just so many.
Scream in
John
March?
Wick. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think Scream might have been. So I'll just quickly pull up the movie releases for you guys. So Shazam 2 as well. 65, that Adam Driver dinosaur
Yeah.
film, Dungeons and Dragons as well. So there was a lot of things in March that released, and we saw that not many of them really performed that well. John Wick did really good, but Dungeons and Dragons didn't perform to the level that they were expecting, and it was a good movie as well.
Yeah.
Shazam 2, DC in general has just been dying all over the place, so
Yeah.
that might not have had a crazy box office anywhere else, but it seems like they're repeating the process again with March next year, where it's going to be absolutely stacked and it's going to have such an effect on these films. And I cannot understand why they've taken it where it had a complete clear, I think it was a 5 week run in IMAX screens with no competition around it. The Marvels maybe, but it wasn't in IMAX. And it just had a clear road to completely that time of year as well. It's really good time to push for Oscars and stuff, which now it's going to be out of the running for that.
Yeah.
And to have it moved from that time period to a time where it's going to probably at most get 1 week of IMAX screenings before the next thing comes along and that takes over. It just seems insane, and it just seems stupidity, and it's all kind of stemming from these strikes that the studios seem to be negotiating on, but not really going in with everything that they really can to dissolve the situation. And it's a real shame. because I was really looking forward to Dune 2 as well, and I think that first movie was really good, and it got hampered by the day and date thing of HBO, and yeah, that really harmed it, and now I think
Mhm.
it's just going to be put to March, where March typically just isn't really that good of a time to release movies in anyway.
It depends on the movie. Like Scream 6 did really well, but Scream 6 weirdly makes sense. I know it's like that or October are the 2
Yeah.
times you would release a movie like Scream. Scream 6 makes sense to me. Even John Wick to a certain extent makes sense to me. But but something like Dune, no, that just reeks of summer movie or winter, right? It feel it, you got to go by the feeling too, like movies are an emotional going experience. It's a moving picture, and you got to have that emotional association to the experience of going to the cinema, and and the seasonal time of that with Dune is actually a lot more fitting, to me at least. That's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, and I think just in general, the way that a lot the studios don't realize they're cannibalizing themselves with these overblown budgets on stuff. And
Yeah.
I was watching a great video the other day talking about. I forgot the channel, unfortunately, but I'll try and remember and leave it as a pinned comment. But they were talking about how back in the day, these mega event movies, blockbusters, they're called because the reason they have that name is because people would line up around the block to see
Hmm.
them,
Yeah.
and it would just they'd be major event films where the studio would invest lots of money to make it this big summer event thing, this one picture. They'd put all their eggs in one basket, and because of that you had things like Jaws,
Yeah.
Star Wars, big movies, The Godfather and stuff like that. They weren't going crazy wild with the budgets. But nowadays it seems like almost every single film they're spending over $250 million, sometimes into the $300 million zone, and they're trying to make these major event films every single week. And
Right.
when you get to a point where everything's a major event film, there's no longer major event films because everything is just seen as the standard. And
Hmm.
because of that, they're just cannibalizing themselves so much. Disney's lost $1 billion this year on movies, and it's because they've got such overblown budgets where that people in general don't go to the cinema every single week. No matter how good the movie is, like the release lineup is, they're not going to go every single week because it's not part of their habits as viewers. You can make a 100 great movies a year, but they're not going to go see all of them. And I've had to skip out on some because it's like I went to the movies one week and it's been like, oh well, I've got to get childcare for the next one, and every time I go, I've got to organize things so I can go to the film and review it. And yeah, it just life gets in the way for people, and I think they hit a point now where it's like there's so many of these films, and they're available on streaming really, really quickly. We're in a cost of living crisis as well, so people just can't afford to even go out that often and spend as much
Yeah.
money as movie tickets cost. And yeah, it's just getting to a point where I I thought June was in a great place because it didn't really have that much competition around it. The Marvels, that was about it. It was competing against one other film, and I think both people, normal people, general audiences, they could go and see both films and not feel like they're blowing all their money. And to just see them move it from there to a time where everything's like really, really packed. I just wonder what the whole thing is. And tying back to the original point of actors promoting the movies and doing the chat shows and stuff, I don't feel like it needed that. And yeah, I
No.
think moving this is just a really stupid move because it's also given Disney an advantage as well. The Marvels is now going to IMAX. Wasn't filmed for it, but all you do is remove those matte lines, the
Mm,
black bars on the screen, and you've got an IMAX movie there for you.
yeah. I saw a trailer for the Marvels in IMAX, so they can convert it where you can watch it there and you get the sound, but none of it was intentionally filmed for it. Although I'm wondering, does it help? 'Cause if there's one thing I think we all can agree on when it comes to a certain personality in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Brie Larson is an undeniable, divisive personality. The second she says, and the last time I feel like people did not get on her ass was when she was at, I don't know, one of those film festivals and someone asked her about the Johnny Depp shit. And the way she handled it, people were like, you know what? Maybe Brie Larson isn't as bad as we all want her. She's an alright person. Like, I have none of this disdain for Brie Larson that everyone else really feels, nor am I enamored by the woman by any means. But I am wondering if there's some type of benefit to it, because I think especially with Disney, like we've talked about Rachel Zegler, and I do feel like Rachel Zegler is greatly affecting Snow White. In a similar sense of how Ezra Miller affected the Flash. Even though Ezra Miller couldn't speak, the personality of Ezra Miller created a lot of divide for people, and I think Rachel Zegler is doing something like that's very damaging to Snow White. With everything she's saying. And there's just something about Brie Larson that we see whenever she does anything on the internet, it's just met with so much crap right away. So there might be a slight benefit to them releasing the Marvels. We're like, oh, we don't have to worry about the PR with Brie Larson on the internet. We can actually dodge this. And I feel like that'd be a benefit. But on the flip side, I feel like Iman Vellani is a massive benefit, especially for like certain international markets. And I think Iman Vellani is a very much beloved personality. So I do think she would have benefited it. Maybe Sam Jackson to a certain extent. But
I
yeah,
I actually think people have come around on Brie Larson genuinely, and I think Rachel Zegler is one of those reasons because I'm gonna be honest, yeah, I actually like
Rachel
I do
Zegler's
like Brie
so bad.
Larson.
Yeah.
Just reporting in general, and we saw this with the pandemic going into the Ukraine war. The media cycle, they need a story to focus on to sell
Mhm.
papers that week, and it's the same with YouTubers and
Oh,
online.
definitely.
You need that personality that you can just make videos about, milk content. And Brie Larson was that. I mean, how many videos of Brie Larson were there?
Oh
And
my God.
let's be honest, Greg. Fair enough. What one or two things might have been worth a story, but there were a lot of the time it was just anything she did. It was like we'll have to make a video, and I think if we're being honest, guys, a lot of it was because those videos were getting views and therefore making money, and they
Yeah.
thought, well, we're just going to make a story out of anything that she does because it's going to make views and make money. And they decline in popularity. And then Brie Larson, completely to her credit, I don't think she's really just she's dealt with it so well. She's never thrown a meltdown or
Definitely.
responded to it. She's just kept herself really classy and hasn't, sunk down to any level to acknowledge it. And even things like the Johnny Depp question she got asked, she's like, "Why are you asking me?" And I think people have just, I think when reporters and journalists, when they go after someone, they will hit a point where it's like, "Oh no, we actually respect this person because they've
Yeah.
slugged it out with us, even if they've done nothing back or deserved it in
True.
the first place." And then what they realize is that another person comes along that gets all that attention, and that they can become the focus of the stories, and they can be the person that they make lots of videos about and get lots of views about. And
Yeah.
that is what Rachel Zegler's done. And it's
Yeah,
kind of
definitely.
like, and she seems to be doing the opposite of what Brie did, which was she's obviously stepped away from
Oh,
social media, and it's clear that it has become an issue. And I felt bad that video we made. We didn't even really go after her, to be honest, but I think just putting a spotlight on someone in general is, it can stir up negative things. Um,
well, I think Brie Larson, she especially like she's very different than the Rachel Zegler, because yeah, the Rachel Zegler is like very much, she still like says stuff, right? Whereas Brie Larson, that hatred just seemed to gestate for so. Remember when she like launched her YouTube channel and it just met with so much crap? When I was like, gosh, she hasn't said anything bad for like. Because I remember when she even did like fucking what was that? What Between Two Ferns, a spoof interview show. People were like, man, she seems so uptight. I'm like, guys, the whole point is the celebrity is supposed to be uptight. But I feel like other interviews, even her Hot Ones interview, I think went over really well, even via the internet, So, and I liked her. I actually liked her in the Fast and Furious movie that she was in. And, she's done other great work as well. But
she kind of hits me as someone who just doesn't really give a shit that much, but like she
true.
probably did originally when she blew up and got massive. Because I can imagine it's such a massive change on your life, to be honest, to go from like making indie films to then becoming the star of a Marvel movie and then seeing all the backlash from it. I can imagine it just completely messes with you. So, but yeah, I think
Do you think Marvels will hit 1 billion?
no, I don't think the Marvels will hit a billions.
You
No,
sexist,
and
Paul.
that's
You sexist. Pure sexist
yeah.
over here.
Okay, but can I give my reasons before you
Nope,
start
nope.
calling me
I
that?
think it's just
Please.
it surmises to one thing, and it's pure sexism.
Yeah, it's not because I think in general. I mean, what was the last Marvel movie to hit a billion? Was it No Way Home?
I have no idea.
I
Was it
think
no way? Oh man.
Doctor Strange came close. I think that did 800 million. Guardians did about 880, I think. And yeah, I think just in general, that kind of shows that these movies aren't. They used to be guaranteed to hit a billion, but at the moment, just the way that the audience is going with Marvel in general, Secret Invasion didn't get a million viewers first week and stuff like that. And
Oh
I
yeah.
think in general, it's going to be very difficult for this film to out of the blue, beat Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, beat Doctor Strange: Multiverse of Madness, Guardians 3. I think if the Marvels was going to hit a billion, those movies would have done it too. So I think in general that there's a certain state of the market right now where Marvel movies just aren't doing what they used to, and it might surprise everyone. I would definitely be surprised. I was wrong about Barbie.
Yeah, you were. I'm
I
I'm
was
I'm
very wrong about Barbie.
I'm
Clearly,
championing for Marvels. Not only because you reminded me of the Barbie thing, I'm now going to hardcore champion that Marvels makes $1 billion.
but in its credit as well, the Marvels now has IMAX screens, which are premium tickets, so it instantly makes more money off doing that, and it's also no longer competing with Dune 2. So it could do. I don't even know what the December movie releases look like, but it got way more of a stronger chance now. But I just don't
Yeah,
think that it will hit the billion, and that's purely because of just the interest in Marvel in general and the way
true.
that all of the other MCU movies since No Way Home have been at the box
Well,
office as well. I mean, Ant-Man: The Wasp: Quantumania, did that do 500 million or
oh god,
something?
yeah, that did
Roughly.
poorly. That did terrible.
Yeah, and that was starting off Phase 5. That was introducing Kang properly as well. Obviously, I know there was hints of him with He Who Remains in the statue at the end of Loki.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think just in general, the way the market's going for movies this year as a whole as well, and obviously, the Brie Larson backlash is going to probably come into full swing. I don't think it'll. I'm hoping it's not this bad this year, and I'm hoping we can have a nuanced conversation about it because we get pulled into it as well. And obviously, there's people who will label everything one way or the other. Like if we say we like something, we've said it before, we're a shill. If we say we don't like it, we're a hater. And it's the same if you say you don't like a certain movie. If I say I didn't enjoy the Marvels, I'm going to get called a sexist. I know it for a fact. And even if I sit here and give reasons why I didn't like it, and they're the exact same reasons as I gave for Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, say I'll still get called the same thing.
Yeah.
I think with Marvel in general, people have kind of almost realized like there's a corporate. I mean, phase 1 to 3, there was an idea that these things were made by corporations and stuff, and there was a corporate mentality to it. But I think in the latest phases, you can really see the corporate strings behind
Oh,
these
definitely.
films and how it's kind of like we have to do this. This is like Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, fine, but I feel like when I'm watching that, I can see the corporation behind it and the whole everything in it just being like almost like a product. And I feel like viewers are sort of becoming wise, and in general, like Phase 4 just felt formless and directionless. I know that's a criticism that gets lobbied at it a lot, but it just feels like the entire phase was just made for the sake of making Marvel movies, and they didn't really have an idea of exactly where they were going to go, and they just kind of did lots of different stories rather than having
Yeah.
the connected universe they once had. But yeah, the Marvels, it could surprise me, but personally, I, I I just can't see it hitting the billion. And
Well,
how many movies have done that this year?
it doesn't need to make apparently I just looked it up. Its production budget is listed as only $130 million, which
Okay,
is actually relative. This is from Forbes. So that's relatively low for a Marvel movie. Like
yeah,
just You,
No,
you would need to
good for
make like
them.
what, like 300 million to make a profit or something like that. That's actually not.
Yeah.
That's not bad. Like, they might have a guaranteed hit on their hands if they play their cards right. But we should. Do you want to talk quickly about before we go into the writers' strike about this thing that from Ultimate Scooper, My Time to Shine Hello has put out that has stirred. They put it August 26th, so Saturday, in the U.S.
Ugh. Can we say it's breaking news and
Yeah, let's
pretend
say
it's just came out?
capital all
Yeah.
breaking exclamation mark. We got this. I shall read it. Is My Time to Shine Hello a woman or a guy? I don't know. Do you know?
It's a girl.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Well, a woman. I sound a bit
Woman,
sexist
stop
there,
being
so I
sexist
don't
on this
know.
podcast, Paul. Cut it out. No screenwriters will be hired for Kang Dynasty and Secret Wars until the strikes are over. But it should. I actually didn't read all this, but it should be Phil Lord and Chris Miller. I'm pretty sure I'm not the first person to suggest them, and for good reason. And across the Spider Verse, they handled 280 variations of Spider Man. 95. Okay, so this is editorial here. 95 of which are unique and named characters. Yada yada. It's a great movie. Okay. Well, that's interesting. I mean, if I will start with saying that I think Phil Lord and Chris Miller, I get the argument for why they would be a good choice. However, I would still say don't do it, because Phil Lord and Chris Miller, and they're co-writers on it on the Spider-Man movies, but they thrive best when they have a great amount of producer creative control as well. And I don't feel like, if anything has proven itself within the Marvel Cinematic Universe, that unique voice they would not allow that. I mean, they got fired from freaking Star Wars, which I know like that's Lucasfilm,
Yeah.
it's a different department than Disney.
Disney.
But even within the MCU, the way Phil Lord and Chris Miller, if you really want their voice to truly shine, you need them to have that creative control as producers. And it seems like even with the Spider-Verse movies, they really allow them to do that. It's Sony, it's Marvel, it's still Marvel, of course, but it's not the MCU. So I actually don't feel like they're. I personally just wanted to, like, I get the dream scenario, but I don't see it being a thing where they can cooperate, as we were talking about corporations and all that jazz that would totally intervene. But the Kang Dynasty and Secret Wars writers, I mean, they've been. Who was the writer for that? Do you remember who they were? It was the guy who wrote Quantumania, right? It was the writers who did like
Jeff
Quantumania,
Loveness.
and was it Michael Waldron as well, or was it just Jeff Loveness?
Yeah. Jeff Loveness and Michael Waldron. So I completely agree with what you said about Lord and Miller. You know, they've had issues with Disney in the past where the whole thing with Solo, I just can't see them doing it. And also, you have to bear in mind, they've done 3 multiverse movies in a row.
Yeah.
They wrote the first Into the Spider-Verse as well, didn't they?
Yeah, I think they were. I mean, they're still co-writers on it, though. You know, they get like all the credit, but they didn't even like direct those movies. You know, and that's a big part of it as well.
Yeah, so I mean they did it. So yeah, they've done 3 in a row. I mean, are they going to want to just jump into another Marvel multiverse movie? Personally, I don't think so. And I think the whole thing that you're saying about creative control, you're completely right. I don't think Sony had that much faith in the Spider-Verse films, and you know, it's an animated movie. It's often its own thing. They didn't promote it massively, and it was more sort of a sleeper hit that did really well on Netflix, and
Yeah.
you know its sequels made the money. And I think they solely got lots of creative control because it was again animated, so you know things aren't as strict because there's not as high of an expectation. For example,
Mhm.
if we did a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles live action movie versus an animated one that we've just seen,
Yeah.
I think the animated one, you're going to get more creative control and just get to do what you want because there's not the pressure on it. And it was also not Peter Parker, it was a Miles Morales story as well.
Mhm.
And I think Sony were just like, oh, yeah, you guys want our Miles Morales animated Spider Man movie? That's totally fine. Yeah, go off, do what you want, whatever. We're not that bothered about it. And obviously, then it became this big hit. When it's Kang Dynasty and Secret Wars, you know,
Mhm.
what Marvel's been building up to, what they that's going to be their next end game. there's no way they're just going to give them the whole thing and be like, yeah, go off, do what you want, mate. Whatever you think, mate, do what you want. And I think they're well aware of that. And I think they've got enough prowess in Hollywood now they would get given more creative control, I think, because they've proven themselves. But I still don't see why they would want to work in that environment when it's been, it's clear that a lot of people, Marvel always has the final say. For example, Thor: Love and Thunder. Taika Waititi gets a lot of shit for that film, but from what I've heard, it was a much longer movie, and they kind of cut it down to 2 hours, which was mandated by Marvel. And maybe there exists a really, really good cut of Love and Thunder out there, but we'll probably never see it. And yeah, I just, even for those guys, I'd rather see them do something else than a Marvel movie. I feel like they've shown they can take, a pretty obscure. Miles Morales isn't a massively obscure character. He's still Spider-Man at the end of the day, but they've shown they can take that, an animated movie as well, and change how animation's made. And I'd rather see them do it in another genre rather than just like another multiverse movie for Marvel, because I think that's limiting what these guys can do, and I think they could really knock it out the park with something else. But obviously, yeah, if Jeff Loveness and Michael Waldron have been taken off, that might show that Marvel's taking stuff seriously. And I didn't talk about this before, but when you brought it up, the budget for the Marvels as well, they've not let that spiral out of control, so they're going to make more profit from that, which is a smart way to go. These who was it? It was Charlemagne's podcast where they were talking about how Endgame was the Super Bowl, and then for some reason Marvel kept thinking they had to spend Super Bowl money on their Saturday morning league stuff.
It's a good
And
analogy.
I think Marvel's finally starting to realize, these big mega event movies, that's where you put all the money, and that's where you get all the cast in. And
Right.
these littler ones, they don't need those crazy overblown budgets where you need to spend upwards of 250 million, because it's not going to pay out. And even if the movie does well, it's still going to seem like a flop, because snobby YouTubers will talk about how little the movie made. I think just Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, I think that's really made Disney realize, like, oh crap, we are spending far too much money on these movies when we don't need to, and if we have more realistic expectations. But yes, Secret Wars is obviously going to be the Super Bowl again, and I think, Loveness, I actually like some of the stuff he did in Quantum Mania. I don't feel like that film was his fault. I feel the scenes with Kang and Michelle Pfeiffer, you can really see why he was brought onto it.
Yeah.
And I feel like it was probably Marvel who were like, well, you've got to make Cassie Lang a big character in it. And it's like, but it's called Ant-Man and the Wasp. It's like, yeah, whatever, just make it about Scott and his daughter. You've got to have that stuff. And he's like, but I want to explore Kang and his origin story. He's like, well, you can have that scene. We'll give you one scene where you get to really explore that, but you better fill in that corporate shit, and you better start selling some action figures of that blob guy down in the quantum verse.
Well, the Marvel movies we all know are very heavily committee made. And even Michael Waldron, he was getting so much crap for Multiverse of Madness. It's the way. I mean, the way the internet works is like you can do something amazing. Like he was a showrunner for Loki, and then he does Multiverse of Madness, and everyone's like, "This guy's shit." And even Xochitl Gomez, I remember she was the one who came out on Twitter and was defending the hell out of Michael Waldron for Multiverse of Madness because he was getting shat on a bunch. And she was saying, like, you don't know the kind of demands they make last minute all the time. The way, like, writers can be the fall guys for some reason. If something's terrible, they're the last ones to get praised for especially for the big movies, like the huge films. They're the last ones to get praised, but they can also be one of the first things to blame for why something is crappy. And like no one ever really talks. I rarely hear, unless it's like written and directed by them. I still have a hard time recalling it. Maybe no, not even the Russos wrote the Captain America movies. Stephen McFeely and Christopher Marcus. The writers are never praised for their screenplays. They're not. And I think Endgame and Infinity War are actually scripted really well. So is, Captain America Civil War and Winter Soldier. I think there's scripted very, very well. But you rarely hear people talk about. It's always about the director. But if a movie's not liked, they say it's the writer's fault. And but we all know, like it's more than just the writer. Like yeah, it's supposed to start with a screenplay. It doesn't really happen that way at Marvel. We all know that. It starts with a big board of here's what you need to include and here's what we need to get to. And now fill it in with some scenes so we can finally get there. And so yeah, I don't feel like it's fair to put it on them. I am wondering if because they got Matt. It looks like they're looking at some of their people who did well with certain properties. You got I'm forgetting everyone's names. The director of Shang-Chi, who's doing King Dynasty, and then you have the writer, the showrunner for WandaVision, who's doing Fantastic Four. He was the showrunner, right? I have the showrunner of him doing Fantastic Four. So I'm wondering if they're gonna maybe want him to do Secret Wars or something like that. Like I don't know who the right. I don't at this stage in the game. I'm like I don't know which screenwriter would be the best fit. Like I have no idea. Like people say the Russos, maybe sure is Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFreely, maybe. But at the end of the day, if there's one thing that's really apparent within Marvel, it's that a lot of times it's not really going to matter how good of a screenplay it is. They're probably going to go in there and be like, change this, we need this, we need this, we need this, make this happen, make this happen, make this happen. And a lot of it's going to be at the last minute. And if it's crap, they blame them. And if it's not, if it's great, they're not going to get any credit. It's just the way it goes.
Well, I've seen a rumor this week talking about James Gunn. I mean, he's obviously got a massive name now, but apparently he didn't want Star-Lord to go to Earth until Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 because that was going to be the point where they had this big closing of his arc, from that first film when he got abducted from the planet after his mother died. And Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 was where they were going to pay that all off. Now, this is all rumor. It might not be true, but what happens in Endgame is that Star-Lord ends up on Earth and just kind of looks around and then leaves. Like I'm also pretty sure that James Gunn didn't want Adam Warlock at the end of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, but that got mandated as well. And I feel like, that thing with Star-Lord kind of robbed where his eventual arc was going to go on Earth. And it just feels like the studio kind of do what they want. We know for a fact they don't tell the other people working on other projects what's happening on certain things, because there's been a number of them that have come out and said, I had no idea what was working on, like what was happening in WandaVision, because I didn't get to see it before or know what was happening before we started making this movie. I think that's a lot, that's a big problem with Marvel. I just don't know what's going to happen with Secret Wars. I kind of feel like they're trying to catch lightning in a bottle again. And I think it's going to be very difficult. We've got so much controversy surrounding it. But from what I've heard as well, I mean, if the rumors about Hugh Jackman, Tobey Maguire, and Robert Downey Jr. being the three main leads in it, it's going to just print money, isn't it? It's like,
yeah, I mean, if that's you just saying that made me go, that sounds fucking awesome. Like, I don't even need to know the plot. Like, I'm there. I'm automatically there.
Don't need a screenwriter.
Just have them show up and fight. Let them improvise. Yeah.
But yeah, obviously, there's so many issues in Hollywood at the moment, and that takes us into today's main topic. We're 43 minutes in.
43 minutes in, we got here. We got here.
Yeah, the strikes. So yeah, there's been a lot of talks this week. The WGA sat down to negotiate with the ATMTP. Is it? I always get the anagram
the AT&T company, AMPTP.
Yeah, and things haven't gone well. So there's been, the strikes have continued, and there's been a lot of backlash over it. So the WGA's proposal, to be fair to the studio, I'm actually going to stick up for them a bit. They did meet them on quite a lot of the issues that they were after. For example, the AI, there was talks about that. They did give them more residuals. I think they raised their pay as well. But the main thing that it came down to was the amount of writers that were allowed to be, like the minimum amount of writers that had to be on a project.
Right.
And that was where they kind of clashed on it.
What was it called? The minimum staff versus the mini rooms and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, they wanted more people involved to help with the writing, so it wasn't as much crunch, I think. But yeah, just having more people involved with it. The studio didn't want to do that at all. And Bob Iger's came out and, well, they say Bob Iger's personally offended by it. And just looking at, I've got a table of the money that they wanted, and so it's basically, this lists all of the studios, how much the annual cost to them would be, and what their annual revenues are. Now, for example, Disney, their annual revenue is 82 billion, and the cost that this would be to the writers would be 72 million. So, as an example, it's 0.088%. So it's not even 1% of their annual revenue that they would have
Mhm.
to pay to the WGA, and they're kind of dragging their heels on it and just being like, "No, I don't want to do it." And it just seems so greedy. It seems so stupid. I've said this on the podcast so many times that they are going to have to like close this deal, because otherwise the industry's dead. At some point, they have to do it, and the fact that they've started delaying movies because of this now, it's insane to me. It really is. I just don't understand what's going on and why they've decided to go this way with it. I and I unfortunately, the cynical side of me sees it as them being like, well, they can't go on much longer. I think the strike at this point is about 120 days into it when we release this video, roughly.
Yeah.
And I think they're just thinking, at some point they're going to be so desperate they'll just take any deal that we give them. And I think they're just kind of playing hardball and trying to drag it on as long as possible, even
Yeah.
though it's going to cost them in the long run, probably delaying movies. Going to see the same repeats of the box office this year, where we've got
Yeah.
so many films releasing so closely together with such big budgets that there's no way they can make their money back, because they're not going to have the audience for as long as they deserve it, because people are going to be watching it one week, probably not going to repeat viewings, and going to the next thing the next week. And
Yeah.
yeah, it just seems really stupid. What's your opinion on it, Greg?
I feel like the studios, because there was something that I listened to Dan Merle's video this morning, and he brought up a point that I thought was very. I mean, like honestly, I think Dan Merle's like the best at breaking this stuff down.
Great.
Yeah, like he's amazing at it. I really, if you guys don't watch Dan Merle, watch Dan Merle, especially when it comes to these topics, because he'll like take all the articles and everything, the things that I'm like, wow, there's just so much information here. Um, and yeah, he really breaks down the numbers and stuff. And one of the initial points he brought up that I thought was really, really strong, which is true, because when we talked about the writer's strike a couple weeks ago, we were discussing how they even said, "Hey, we got a meeting." The Writers Guild, like pretty much like the board of directors, the president, not like everyone in the Writers Guild, just like the main people in charge of the union. They had a meeting with the AMPTP, but they wanted to not reveal their discussions to the public. They didn't want to reveal their discussions to even their writers, because they were like, we know that they can create like discourse and whatnot, and they just need to hash this out internally. They need to negotiate, and that was part of the agreement that they had, which was to not disclose any of this that they're doing. And a big part that is, I remember that clearly. And it was one of the things that did strike me, no pun intended, one of the things that did, kind of like, oh, it's kind of weird that the AMPTP is putting this out there, because they released a statement of, hey guys, we presented something to the writers, and look at us. We're offering, the way they phrased their language was, a by the numbers, good way to make them look good and be like, we offered them stuff and it's better than before. And they put out they literally released, like, you could find the details of everything they released, of what they offered as their final negotiation, and it wasn't supposed to be a public statement. And to me, it was kind of a Machiavellian tactic that left like the writers feeling quite um, beguiled. Uh, those are my last big words of the podcast, by the way. I'm not even sure if I use those words
It's a good
correctly.
word.
I'm pretty sure I use those words correctly. But yeah,
I don't know.
yeah, I'll look it
Sounds
up
like you
later.
did.
Like, no, we can keep it in the video. I used them right. But yeah, but it's because it was supposed to be an internal negotiation, and it could leave people going like us, going, well, guys, what the hell, writers, fuss up that you got yourself a deal, and then everyone's getting their opinions in there, and none of the court of public opinion right now actually matters in terms of getting these negotiations just settled. And everyone right now, there's so much. It's a very acrimonious situation. Everything is very sensitive between them, and then they're very reactive, and they should just be in the rooms hashing this shit out. And then when the AMPTP decided to do that, I think it just added on a much bigger level of distrust, because they weren't part of the agreement was they weren't supposed to release this shit. It was supposed to be a negotiation internally, and then they got their right. So then the big part of it, of what the Writers Guild was, the members were saying, was the way they released that was meant to help a manipulative tactic to create a divide within the writers, because there are going to be some writers who read this and think, wait, I like this, we should say yes to this, and there's going to be other writers who don't, and then it creates a discourse among them. And the whole point is to keep the writers in harmony and create it's to be in unity, to be a union together. And so I think of the way the AMPTP went about it, there are a lot of like little loopholes. They're making progress on everything there is progress on. The main thing that we were talking about, of course, like the mini rooms, are the thing that the writers are really trying to eliminate that. And to my understanding, like how a mini room essentially works is it's twofold. If someone pitches like a screenplay and they want to see is there a chance that this could be a series? Let's hire like 2 to 3 writers to write like a couple of episodes, and they pay them less than usual, or sometimes it's just for if they want to see if they want to renew for another season. And these are writers who are not they can't work on anything else during this time period, and B, they're paid less than usual generally, and C, a big part of it is they're not guaranteed to continue on in the series. So a lot of times they can help create something, but then they're just let go afterwards, and they don't get to be a part of the staff. And so there seems to be, I see it online with I listened to quite a few videos about it, where even the opinions surrounding the writer's room, the writing staff, the mini rooms and whatnot, there are people who are very much going, the writers shouldn't be arguing about this. And there are people who are going, the writers should be arguing for this. I actually do understand what the problem is here for that, because they're trying to give writers a chance to feel a little bit more secure, feel a little bit more safe, and then have an opportunity. Because if a writer cannot stay on board for a show to be a part of the production process, the post-production process, it never gives them an opportunity to become like a showrunner or get even consistent gigs. It really affects their career and business, because like actors, writing is also in its own way its own kind of audition process on top of that too. So there's barely any progress on that part. The AI, it's like they've had no, when you read the stuff the AMPTP says, sometimes it sounds like, oh, they've made progress. And then when you break it down, you're like, they actually haven't made any progress on what's been said here. And especially regarding the use of AI, because a lot of it can be very flowery language to the point where it can sound like one thing, but when you really decipher it, especially regarding AI, they don't really have much progress in that department, where you're like, okay, the writers they're trying to even understand how they themselves can find some type of structure where they can innovate some type of AI, because there's camps where they don't want AI whatsoever. And then there's this other side of, is there a way we can reasonably figure out how we can incorporate AI in some capacity that is not about them just writing the screenplay themselves? And the pushback from the AMPTP is, to me, it just sounded like, we can revisit this in a couple of years, but we want to still have this be a part of the inclusion in the conversation. And to me, I understand the fear of that, because now, what was the thing? I'm sure you've heard about it, that the AI scripts, if it's just a purely AI generated script, that cannot be copyrighted. In order for it to be copyrighted, there has to be at least a human rewrite on it in some way.
Yeah, so you can't copyright an AI written script because all it is a prompt, and you've not really come up with it, and someone else could randomly do the same prompt and come up with the exact same thing. And then if a studio, say I just type the same prompt as a studio, gives me the same script, and then the studio release a movie, and I could potentially have made that script before the studio release the film, and I could go to a court and be like, look, mate, this is my copyright. I've got the date on the script. I wrote it for it was my script first, so we're suing Disney. So yeah, you can't copyright AI created work. And what they were going to do was, in order to bypass that, was get the script written by AI and then pay someone a very low wage to come in and just tidy some things up, change some things about, and then that makes it copyrightable. So yeah, that was another way where they're just kind of screwing workers out of it. I think going public with the terms was just so bad, because the thing with unions is, if you sign up to a union, you're part and parcel with them. You've got to take the good and the bad with it. And one of the bad things is that if a union goes in and negotiates with an organization, they don't really put those things to a vote,
Right.
and they'll often make the decision for you to try and get you the best deal, or and in some ways they're going to lose out on some things and whatever, but them putting out the terms of the deal, it's purely done just to cause friction. And you're
Yeah.
completely right, because I've seen the way that public opinion's swayed online, and a lot of people are saying they've agreed to 80% of the terms. It's a good deal. The writers are now greedy for not taking it, and the WGA is greedy for not taking it. And it's kind of like that's clearly been put out to sow dissent, because they have agreed to a lot of things. And I'm not a writer, so I can't. Like, on paper, sure, it seems like it's a good deal, and it seems like I even thought, as much as I bashed the studios, I did think they've taken on board some things and are trying to work around it. But I'm not a writer, so I can't fully grasp the situation and be like, well, is it actually a good deal? You know what I mean? There's situations where I like you'll just not, if you're not in the position yourself, you'll have no grasp of what it actually means, and you'll just be looking. And one of those things that's come up actually from that discussion is, someone's at some point this week said that writers get paid $11,000 a week to work on a TV show. Now, there's been a lot of people who've taken that and thought, oh, they must make $11,000 a week for the whole year. And that's not the case. They'll
No.
work on a show for maybe 3 to 4 weeks or something, and they'll get $11,000 for those weeks. Then they got to live off that for the rest of the year. So it's not a stable job, and you're constantly looking for work. And there's just these things that are getting put out, and
Yeah.
it not to be the guy who's like, I can see things from both sides, but it's clear that a lot of things are getting put out into the public eye that are turning people against the studios and turning people against the strikers. And these guys have got to work together at the end of the day, and they have to come to a certain point. Both sides are going to have to give up something at some point, and both sides are going to have to gain something. I think it's good they're making headway, but personally, I do lean more towards the writers and the actors in terms of what I think they're getting. I did like the maths on what the strikers were asking for, and it was something like 2 episodes of Secret Invasion would cover all of the writers for an entire year. Um, one day of Barbie pulled in enough for Warner Brothers to pay the writers. Universal, they could probably make theirs from copyright claim and YouTubers, and there's no way yet. Apple, all the writers want from Apple is 17 million, and there's no way that Apple don't have 17 million
Yeah.
lying around. I can tell you that
Yeah.
for free right now, Greg. That is chump change to those guys. They will have that money. They probably wasted that money on something, on an accounting error or something.
Yeah.
And it just seems like they're just, in general, corporations do this a lot when people ask for more money. I've talked about it in the past with my job experience when I've asked for raises and they've said no, and it's been like, well, I'll see them wasting money on buying an extra TV for the office that they don't need,
Yeah.
and that just never gets turned on and gets thrown out in the trash. And yeah, for the amount of money that Hollywood wastes, you're throwing it all into one thing, and then there's people in the corner who aren't making enough to live on, and it's kind of like, yeah, just think about it, please, because you're going to destroy the industry if you don't. So yeah, it's all over the place, and they've still got to negotiate with the actors as well.
Yeah, I think those writers who got, I forget exactly how the percentage breakdown goes down when the big numbers got released of they offered them like $11,000 a week or something like that, because it's all dependent on how many weeks you're contractually obligated to be a part of this show and yada yada yada. And I believe that is for the Article 14 writers, which I only recently learned about. Which Article 14 writers, it's not most of the writers on the staff on the staff. Article 14 writers are the ones who also have like additional credits, like a showrunner or is also like a producer or a story editor or something like that. So they're trying to the WGA is trying to look after up and coming writers, people who are new writers, and then your average writer, and not just your special writers, you know. And that's the big part of the protection game here. And so I am definitely more on the writers side. There's not too much that I've heard. I can't even really think of anything off the top of my head where I'm like, what I'm curious to hear, when it sounds like us, the public, are never going to get. We're never going to get it. I'm very curious to hear one day down the road what the residuals, how they're going to factor that out, because the AMPTP offered some type of crazy thing of, we're going to have a private meeting like every once in a while with like the heads of the WGA, where we will reveal the numbers for streaming video on demand, where we'll reveal those numbers, and then we can negotiate, we can figure something out, and it'll be like a periodic thing that we can do. But it wouldn't be something that, if I'm just a writer on, I don't know, some random show like Harley Quinn, if I'm one of the main writers on Harley Quinn or whatever, I wouldn't get access to those numbers. So that way I can have my agent negotiate on my behalf to see what my contribution is and how much I'm entitled to and all that jazz. So even for them, they're really hiding the residual, the streaming numbers, like so
Yeah,
hardcore. They are hiding. They're fighting tooth and nail to hide that. And the conversation around residuals, yeah, I get the residuals should be higher. To me, I have no real way of possibly having a strong opinion on. I don't know what that percentage should be, though. I really don't, because I have no idea what the hell what the streaming numbers actually are on anything, and the studios are doing whatever they can to make sure that information does not get released. So as much as they'll release all this shit, they are not going to release whatever the SVOD
yeah,
numbers are. And I feel like too, like, because there's two camps with the streaming, right? There's the video on demand, which is when you buy it, like that's probably what I'm going to be doing September 5th when Barbie comes out. I'm going to buy it and watch it so I can cover it. Um, and then of course there's when it goes to like Netflix or HBO Max or whatever it's called, Max, when it goes there, that's a different department and a different kind of streaming number you got to factor in, versus I think they should be entitled to something if people are buying it, like myself, when I spend like $25 to buy Meg 2, that there should be some type of little pay. I don't know what it would be, like 50 cents or some shit, but depending on how many people are buying that, it's all so complicated. I have no way of possibly having a strong opinion on it, but I would like to know the
yeah.
numbers one day.
I feel like they don't tell the streaming numbers because they're so bad. I
Exactly.
genuinely think that a lot of the time, because we've seen in the past when a show does well, they shout it from the rooftops. They're like, "Oh, House of the Dragon episode 1 had 25 million viewers."
Yeah.
Whereas when they don't do it, and stuff like Willow gets removed from Disney Plus 6 months after it gets released,
Right.
I
Right.
think a lot of the time that the studio would be embarrassed
Right.
to put out these numbers that the shows get. So I think they hold them back. We do actually have a fair kind of gauge because we can tell what the interest in a show is like. For example, I don't know the final figures for Ahsoka just yet, but just going off the views I've got in comparison to other shows,
Mhm.
I can kind of judge the popularity from it. And it's the same with trailers. Whenever we do
Exactly.
a reaction or a trailer breakdown, we can normally tell in advance whether a movie's going to be popular and whether there's interest in it. Now, there'll often be some things that, are unexpected hits and you can't guess it. But like I've known stuff's gonna bomb months in advance, and it's purely because of how badly the trailer reaction's done and how Indiana Jones, perfect example.
Yeah.
And I would say I always try and aim for 100,000 views on a trailer breakdown, at least. Marvel, you're normally up in the 500,000 bracket, and that's the height for me. So I sent you a message the other week of when it was the Spider-Man No Way Home
Yeah.
trailer, and it was like 1 million views in 9 hours on
Yeah.
my breakdown of it,
And,
which
and weirdly, you were like, "It's gonna flop," and I was like, "What do you mean it's gonna flop?"
yeah. So knew straight away, yeah, Spider-Man No Way Home is going to be a big movie. But on the opposite side of this, Indiana Jones, 27,000 views on a trailer breakdown. So you can kind of see the difference between that. And we do have a rough idea of how well stuff's doing. And a lot of the time, I feel like the studios don't do it because it's embarrassing. We have to ride out with our views on our chest,
Mhm.
Greg. Like,
Mhm.
if our video bombs, the world has to see it.
Yeah.
But obviously, they've got residuals, money, investors involved, and stuff like that. And it's probably better for them to just be like, well, Red Notice did really well. It was the most popular movie in the world. Well, what's the viewing figures on that?
They're
Really
big.
good.
They're really big.
Yeah, 19 billion.
They're up there.
So yeah, it's. I think they're playing coy, and I think this is going to be something that they always play coy with, and it's purely to save face if something does badly, because for a fact if something does well, they're they're just throwing the numbers out there, saying how popular it was. It's the number one show in the world. That often that tagline always makes me laugh. It's the number one show or the number one movie in the world, because a lot of the time, yeah, most movies debut at number one in the world if they're,
Yeah.
if they've got a good push behind the studio, and they're a big franchise. So yeah, that stuff always makes me laugh. What was the Black Adam trailer? I'm sure The Rock spun it so it was something like Black Adam is the most positively reviewed trailer of all time.
Did
And
he
it's like,
say
what
that?
the hell does that even mean? Something along those lines where it's, I need to find the full quote. Adam
There should be a
trailer.
Rotten Tomatoes score for trailers.
Okay, so 2 words, hashtag Black Adam. Thank you around the world. A staggering 98% positive global review for our Black Adam trailer. What does that even mean, Greg?
I
Because
have
I've
no.
been in the trailer game a long time and I've got no idea what any of that means. A 98%
I don't
positive
think I've
global
ever heard
review
that.
of the
I don't
trailer.
think I've ever.
Yeah.
What a weird way.
So yeah, rather than releasing the actual viewing figures for stuff, they'll often put things out like that. It's like, and they do it all the time where it's like, it's the most popular movie released on Labor Day weekend, starring a woman who written the first draft of it 3 years ago in the future, and they try and spin it positively. But when you've got
You could be like Blue Beetle. The next trailer could be the number one movie in America. It's as simple as
yeah.
that. Just saying that shit when you're like, but if you look at it, it ain't doing well. And it's like that for a lot of number one movies.
Yeah, the numbers don't lie. Men lie, women lie, numbers don't. And I think they put this spin on stuff because, it makes it sound positive and it makes it sound successful. But if you sat down and looked at the numbers, you'd often be like, well, this is pretty shit. And then what happens off the back of that is your stock might dip. For example, say the number one Netflix movie in the world. It's the biggest hit that Netflix have had on the 15th of March, 2024. It's world record breaking.
Yeah.
And then if you sat down and looked at the number of it, and it was like 3,000 people have watched it. Boo, their stock, mate, that's going to just tank straight away because they're going to be like, well, so that's the movie they're bragging about. Therefore, it has a knock-on effect of everything, and be like, well, all the movies they've bragged about in the past, how successful they've obviously not been that successful, and thus it tanks the entire stock. Now, this stock tanking, is something that we can see live. And yet Disney, after the meeting went pretty badly with the
Oh,
WGA,
did it?
their shares actually closed lower than $84. So the shares were $83.11 dollars altogether. So $83.11, which is the lowest that it's been since October 17th, 2014.
Jeez.
So I mean, the graph, if you look at it, Greg, it's just like literally it goes along there. You can see where the meeting happens. Boom, drop, dead. So yeah, it's clearly not went well for the studio, and yeah, I think they're just stupidity, greedy. I was going to say greedity there. Stupidity and greed have just cost them everything. And Tony Gilroy actually came out this week and said the studios have almost nothing in common but greed. We have one problem. The AMPTP does not have their shit together. They do not know. They do not know who they're fucking with. Sorry, guys. It's 10 o'clock at night, and I'm normally in bed by about 7. But yeah, I'm mispronouncing stuff all over the place. But
And he said, "Go watch Andor season 2 when it's out."
yeah, highest grossing Star Wars show released on a Tuesday evening at 6 p.m. in Brazil. So yeah, that'll be no doubt something. I'm sure I sent you a screenshot this week of like Ahsoka. We need to pull up the quote that they're using in the trailer because it's so funny. Just talking about the Star Wars shows, it's kind of like, so this is the tagline that they're using to promote Ahsoka with: the Star Wars show we've been waiting for. It's like, yeah, what are you on about, mate? Are you saying all the other ones were shit? I thought Mandalorian season 1 and 2 are really good.
I like Andor.
So yeah, yeah, I loved Andor. I thought it was brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of weird how stuff's changing with streaming, and I feel the studio's trying to gain more control over their numbers. And because back in the day, you know, you had network television, they had to report it a lot of the time. I feel they obviously had third parties negotiating it, channel networks and so on, who would buy the shows and then show them, and they would get the figures from that. Whereas when it's an in-house streaming service that they own, they control all that. So we're not getting the numbers on it. And clearly, you know, that has an effect on residuals. For example, TSG are suing Disney for underreporting figures. And there is the potential that they could do the same with residuals and just say, well, this streaming show hasn't done very well. They'll say that behind closed doors and be like, and that's why we're not paying you money, guys. But in front of everyone, they'll be like, it's the biggest show in the world.
Yeah.
It's bigger than Squid Game's third weekend. So yeah, very strange place to be in at the moment. I'm hoping that this gets resolved quickly and then they just resolve the actor stuff quickly as well. Because I mean, if they're losing 15% on box offices purely because the stars can't promote it, that's hurting a lot of the back end of films.
And we just need to get back to filming, man. Hugh Jackman can only stay in shape for so long for Wolverine. We need Deadpool 3 filmed.
He's probably on like a diet of an apple and maybe like a bowl of muesli a day just to stay ripped as shit. So I feel bad for the guy. Do you remember when they did Justice League and you could tell they'd brought Ben Affleck in for reshoots and he was just like
bloated?
Yeah.
He was just bloated.
I don't want to body shame the guy, but you could tell he trained really hard to shoot this stuff for Zack Snyder, and then he'd be like, finally that's over. I'm going straight to the diner. I'm gonna pig out and enjoy myself. And then they were like, oh, can you be back in and shoot the entire movie again from the ground up, please?
And that's when he was having his drinking problem. I saw Ben Affleck in person at The Flash. And
oh, no way.
I did that thing where he got out of the limo and he was like literally about to pass me. And I was like, oh my God, it's Ben Affleck. I'm going to take out my phone. He made a split second of contact with my phone. And I immediately took my phone away because I was like, I'm so scared of this guy. Like, he's actually, I thought of every video right in that moment. I got like a array of flashes of every single time Ben Affleck has been mad at someone recording him or trying to just eat his Dunkin' Donuts while smoking a cigarette. But in person, and I did see him up close again. He is a truly handsome gentleman. He's an absolutely
Yeah,
handsome gentleman.
I love Ben. No,
Yeah.
he's a great guy.
I could see he has that thing where you see him and you're like, oh, that is a celebrity. Like you just see you see it. Like that is that is what they call a Hollywood star, right there. Like he's got that presence about him. And my silly mind, Jennifer Lopez was next to him both times, and I never even looked at her once the entire time. I didn't even glance at people. Were like, "Did you see J-Lo?" Like, "Oh yeah, she was there," but I didn't even bother to like take a glance at her. It was just Ben Affleck I was staring at.
I actually know her as Jenny from the Block. Sort of like I probably wouldn't have seen her as a celebrity because she's so down to earth and she's just Jenny from the Block.
Jenny
Really,
from the
now I
Block,
think
man.
about it.
Yeah,
So yeah, don't be fooled by the rocks that she's got. She's still Jenny from the Block. But yeah, lovely little story to end it on. I'll tell you what, you know that that live show I did the other week with talking about social media at Edinburgh Fringe.
yeah.
Well, I was talking to the guy behind it, Darren. He's the host, really nice guy. But he said, "I almost had you on with Grant Morrison, but I thought you just
Ooh.
fangirl out about it." And I was literally like, I smiled and went, "Oh yeah, I probably would have." But deep down, I was like, "Oh man, I would have loved to just sit and chat shit with Grant Morrison for like an hour."
Yeah.
But didn't happen.
Oh, I'm
So
sorry.
both have celebrity stories there where we wasn't meant to be.
Didn't act on anything. Nothing happened. We had almost celebrity stories. Yeah.
I'll call our Jenny up because she's real. What you get is what you see, and she'll tell me about how it's crazy how a moment can just change your life. Anyway, we'll end the podcast there. So thanks again for listening to this week. There's not really been much news, has there? And we're suffering. We're
Hey,
like, we'll
there's been
launch
an
a
hour and
movie news podcast.
15 minutes of news today. We will stretch this shit out for as long as we can. We know how to do it. We know how to ramble.
It's just all opinions, and I often say opinion-based news is opinion-based because there's not actually any facts. Which, yeah. So thanks again, guys. If you
start
want to
every
listen to us on the
podcast
go,
with that. That should be the opener of every one of them.
yeah. So we hope you've had a good time. You know, there's lots of things to discuss. We'd love to hear your opinion in the comments below. You can listen to us on the go at Spotify, Amazon Podcasts, Apple Podcasts. We're on them all. Sometimes I just go for a walk and just listen to myself. I skip through the Greg bits. I'm like, oh,
Me too.
what am I saying? It's rubbish. It sounds terrible. I'm gonna get myself cancelled, but I feel like we've had an all right show there, considering how little stuff there was to talk about. We'd of course love to hear you guys tell us some intelligent stuff, correct us when we're wrong, which is probably a lot. Break the figures out, show us what's happening. Yeah, we love you guys. Thank you for all your support. Thank you for making this the #1 podcast recorded on a Sunday night at 10 p.m. in the UK, across the world, global, worldwide, between two people, one from England, one from America. It's been a crazy breaking all these records. And yet, Greg, any last words this week?
No, man. No, this is perfect. I think this was perfect. I appreciate you readjusting. One day we'll just have like a day off, and then we'll just be filled with anxiety for how behind we are because we decided to have that day off. I know how we are. That's what will happen. Thank you guys for being here. Welcome me to open arms, some of you. And Christopher Nolan's the only director out there. There's no other director.
Ever.
All right.
Ever.
Bye. We done. We did it, Paul.